Let's make sure. Okie dokie. Hopefully we're coming out live. So I'm just going to give it a second for the good old internet to work its magic, I should say. So let's have a look. Let's make sure everything's coming out live and people are joining. So we're going to give it a second for people to join. Hopefully we're coming out live. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Okay, we've got people. Okay, cool. I think we've got people joining us. If somebody could put in the comments to say that we can hear us both. Jenny, just want to just natter for a second to make sure they can hear you as well.
Me natter, never.
Excellent. Okay, cool. I think we're all good. Let's just wait for people to join us. So, slurp of tea whilst we have people join. Excellent. Okay, cool. So welcome to this conversation. Excellent. So we'll let people join in whilst they are joining. So for those of us who are joining, obviously this conversation is going to be about mindset matters. And one of the key things is nerves and how to deal with nerves. Let us know in the comments if you are a person that gets nervous in competition, if you do a dog sport, or if you struggle with your confidence or nerves, if you have a reactive dog, etc. Let us know, and we can obviously talk to those points. So welcome. The good person across the screen is Jenny Gould of the GSD Hub. Some of you may have seen some of the stuff that we've done together. We had done a podcast in the past, which we keep on threatening to do.
Yeah, we must do more.
We must do more. But my good friend and fellow dog sports competitor and coach with her fantastic German Shepherds. How have you been, Jenny? You just returned from a little break?
Yeah, little break. First time away for me and my husband in 12 years together.
Oh, wow.
Abroad anyway. So, yeah, it's been good. Dogs were in the very capable hands of my friend. Sorry?
Does that mean you're going to get divorced now?
No. No. We're fine.
You'll keep this.
We like 3 days. It's only 3 days. Even I can cope with that.
No, we like Dave. Dave's a good one. Dave needs a medal. God love him.
So everybody says that.
Yeah, I wonder why, Jenny, because we all know you. But nonetheless, so hopefully, I'm going to make apologies from the get-go. You can probably hear some squawking in the background. It's not my child, who may make an entrance at some point. It's a litter of puppies. They are desperately trying to fall asleep, but they've just eaten, and they are having that little conflict with themselves about, oh, we're tired, we want to go to sleep, but we can't find the right place. It's quite amusing to watch, really, but nonetheless. So we're going to jump straight in. The conversation, Jenny and myself have had loads and loads of conversation and dialogue about what we do in our professions. We are both dog sports coaches, and we help other people with whatever aspirations that they have, whether it be, in our previous work is to have somebody just have a well-behaved pet, or it's somebody that wants to overcome a particular behavior challenge, or it's somebody that wants to compete in the world of dog sports and potentially compete at the higher level, or just have a level of success that they aspire to. And there's lots of conversations that we've had behind the scenes. And we thought we would open it up to people to share some of the thoughts that we have of overcoming nerves. And that's one of the big things that people struggle with, that ultimately deters them from achieving their success or successes in dog sports. Recently, I did a little poll where I asked people what are the things that really they found struggling or they struggled with. And nerves was a big one. So Jenny, I'm going to open up with a big question. Do you suffer from nerves, or have you suffered from nerves?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't ever stop. I don't think anybody ever gets to a point where they say, I never get nervous anymore. I think what happens is we learn how to channel the nerves. And for me, it becomes adrenaline. And adrenaline can be a positive or a negative, depending on how you utilize it. But if I didn't care about what I did, if it didn't matter to me, I probably wouldn't get nervous. But it does matter. I mean, we put a lot into it with dog sports. We're out training. so much blood, sweat and tears goes into it. So of course it matters when you get to a competition. It matters what the outcome is going to be. So absolutely. Lots of people say to me, you never look nervous. And I think that's a really interesting one, because I think if people say, oh, but it's so obvious I was shaking and, you know, and my legs were trembling, I have to say that, yes, all right, with what we do, we can recognize people that are nervous, even from the subtle signs. But I do feel that a lot of people feel that everybody can see how nervous they are. And actually, truth be told, unless you're actually used to coaching and teaching people who get nervous and doing any form of job that involves, you know, being able to read people, I think a lot of the time people wouldn't really notice it. And I think it becomes a big thing in somebody's head that everybody can see how nervous they are. I get nervous. It may not look like it, but I absolutely get nervous. And it's just about how the adrenaline is then channeled into what I'm doing. So yeah, definitely. You do as well, Kamal, I know.
Yeah, definitely. I think, to be honest, you know, I frame it as getting nerve-sighted, in that to me, it's that little adrenaline dump. And if I'm honest, it's kind of addictive. You know, it's why
I agree. Yeah.
You know, it's why I like the process of not knowing something. I know that sounds a bit sadistic, but I actually quite like that little bit of apprehension. I always have. You know, it gives me an adrenaline hit where, you know, I get that little bit nervous. Definitely, I've improved. So I shared some photos on social media of when I first qualified for Crufts, which was, you know, a few years ago now, 25 years to be precise, when I first went to Crufts. And I was absolutely petrified. And I was petrified because of the unknown. I had magnified it. And it was something that I had worked so hard to achieve and to get to that stage relatively early in my career. And I was actually really inexperienced of competing at that level. Crufts was the fourth championship class I ever worked. Was it fourth? Yeah, the fourth championship class I ever worked, because of the way it happened. My dog had qualified for ticket, and he'd only been able to do 2 tickets at the last 2 tickets of the year, which was, and he happened to win one of those, which then qualified him for the subsequent Crufts in March. Well, our show season finished in the October, and the only ticket that I could work, or the championship class that I could work before Crufts, was in January. So that was 3 classes he'd worked at that level before I had to go to Crufts, which was a massive challenge for us. And I was very much a fish out of water, and definitely I was incredibly nervous. You know, people that were around me joked about, you know, they didn't think I could ever be that white, but I definitely was on that day. But yeah, I was white as a sheet. And it was because... You
wouldn't have been equipped, would you? You wouldn't have been equipped with the skills, the mental skills that you needed, because you'd gone through too quickly. Exactly. You know? Yeah, whereas if people have gone through it more slowly and with more progression and natural progression, then you can learn in bits along the way, like any skill, and you cultivate it and evolves. But to go in that quickly, it's no wonder that you've struggled with it. Because to go
there's a phrase that says, to only the unfortunate few does success come early. And I think that really is a really powerful statement, because there's a process that you endure to be able to, you know, overcome your nerves and to channel that emotion that you're feeling into a given moment. And obviously, you know, X amount of years in, I certainly don't get the way I used to, which was panic, sheer panic. It was that fight or flight response. I was panicking. Everything about my body was just saying, and my brain was saying, get me out of here, panic mode. And I just basically white knuckled it round the round. And then as soon as I got off it, it was like everything was fine again. And I was like, right, I want to get back in there and do it all again. And it was, it was, that dog in particular was a journey of self-discovery, of working through my nerves, because he definitely was a dog that bore the brunt of my nerves, and my nerves of apprehension. For me, it wasn't ever about other people. It was always about my perfection paralysis. It was like, oh, that left turn wasn't good enough. That foot placement wasn't right. He didn't do that. And I would obsess about that nuance when I was competing, when really I wasn't being intentional. I wasn't being present. I wasn't being connected. I wasn't being in the moment. I was thinking about the half a dozen things or more so. That would become my unraveling. So in your early part of your career, did you get more nervous? You know, what was the impact on your dogs? How do you think it impacted them?
Mine was the other way around to yours, actually, Kamal, in that my first ever obedience dog, we did go through the classes all the way through to ticket. And looking back, I think this was probably looking back, a good thing that happened in some ways, because we couldn't do anything at ticket, you know, because he got injured and he was retired at 6. So for anybody who's watched our podcast before, my first 2 dogs that I went, both qualified for ticket, and then both were retired within just a couple of attempts at ticket class. So I had to learn a lot about keeping the faith, coping with failure, coping with things not going right. And I had to deal a lot with that, actually, very much away from the competition. And I think that really, really benefited me. And it gave me dogs that I couldn't get too carried away with how it wasn't easy to get to ticket. It was a massive, massive thing to qualify them for ticket. But I couldn't then go on and then start to get placed in ticket and win tickets and go, oh my God, you know, the absolute opposite of what happened with you. Oh my God, this was not easy. But, you know, sometimes you go through and you think, oh, blimey, this has just happened. How did this happen? I didn't realize it was going to be this easy to get through to that. And that's a little bit tongue in cheek. But I think for me, I had to learn an awful lot dealing with mental pressure that was actually not to do with competition. And I think that made a huge difference for me, because it made me look at my dog sports, my dogs, and doing a dog sport as a whole. If I wanted to get to ticket and I wanted to compete at Crufts and I wanted to make up obedience champions, I had to look at more than just the competition. I had to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture was preparation. And it's something that I've dragged through with everything. And I have got better and better and better at my prep, because I'm a natural control freak. So you talk about you with your left turns and this not being right and your perfection paralysis. I'm a natural control freak. And for me, having to deal with something thrown at me was a struggle, because I like to control everything and I couldn't control the things that happened. So I had to learn very early on how to deal with some of those things, even before it came to competition. So a lot of my learning in a way came slightly away from competitions, and having to, dig deep, cope with failure, cope with a lot of those things. And I think as a result, it meant that I couldn't put the pressure on my dogs by getting to top level really quickly. That would I have done it? I don't know. When I say put pressure on, I mean the dogs would have picked up, potentially from me as I got to top level. And I think I learned an awful lot about myself, hell of a lot about myself, before we ever hit that sort of level. So I think for me, understanding how it affected my dogs was actually at the very beginning was more of a physical thing as opposed to mental. And I had to deal with that. And that was a mental game for me, really, really big mental game for me to be to hang on in there and then make decisions that were right for the dogs and then start again with another dog, which is where I went with it. So mine was actually slightly different, but it's all mental game. The whole lot of it is mental game. Whether it's physical fitness, overcoming injuries with our dogs, I've been there, got the t-shirt. Honestly, I have. And there is most definitely mental game, mental complications for how we deal with those things. The dogs just deal with it. We know what dogs are like. They get on with it. They get on with life. They live in the moment. Whereas we can catastrophize, I can't say the word, catastrophize all sorts of stuff. So I think, for me, looking at the mental game, it's more than just the competing bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
so you raised a really interesting point there, which is definitely something that certainly with Ty that I had, which was although he was very trained, the bit that I hadn't prepared for was I would always train him in a way that I was, my mechanics were smooth and I was all confident, etc. Because, I was very, assured in what I was doing. I didn't prepare him adequately for when I was apprehensive and nervous, and what that looked like to the dog. And obviously now, X amount of years later, one of the things that I really encourage my students to do is to either pretend to be apprehensive and nervous. They say failing to prepare is preparing to fail, and never a true word is spoken. In that, a necessary part of preparing to compete successfully is either putting yourself under a level of pressure, in various ways, not necessarily competition. The other skill to develop is actually to pretend or know the tells that you give that convey you are apprehensive and nervous, and use those as positive triggers with your dog. So a very simple thing that you can do is pretend that you're apprehensive. Look for the things that you do in your ring performance, like classic signs. Some people get fidgety, some people get a little bit panicky, some people start to overhandle, some people start to get a bit dry mouthed or a little bit stiff and still. Whatever tells that you give to your dog in competition that convey to them you're apprehensive, play act those in training and pair them with a reinforcement. Really simple thing, but often something that is overlooked. People prepare for when it all goes well. Everything's smooth. They remember their cues. They remember their footwork. They remember what they have to do. Everything's wonderful. The sun is shining, etc. Good practice for competition is to prepare certainly when it goes, when it doesn't go necessarily in your favor. And that's applicable to whether you are competing in dog sports or you have a dog with a behavior challenge. Always think about how can I train the dog so thoroughly and prepare it for all the eventualities. That in itself is going to give you an abundance of confidence because you've covered all the bases. And that's a really, really important takeaway there. So following on, sorry, go on, Jenny.
I agree. There's something I always recommend people do a lot of is when we know you're going to go into a ring and it's not going to go, your setup isn't going to go right. And your setup for an exercise may not go right either because you're faffing and fiddling and you're overshadowing all your cues and your dog starts to look and go, what's happening? I don't understand any of that. We sometimes do that because we're nervous. But the other thing that sometimes happens is everything's going perfectly. Then the steward wants to reset you. So the steward's let you set up and then said, oh, I'm really sorry. Can you reset here? And it absolutely flummoxes most people, lots of people and their dogs. So I always encourage my guys to train the dog to reset. So that it's not an issue. It's absolutely not an issue if you're set up and then and you've had to either reset because you were flapping and it didn't go quite according to plan, or the steward has to reset you. And I always think if you are prepared for reset, one of those things can make a huge difference. Because if you then have to reset in the ring for any reason, you can say to yourself, it's okay. I've been here. I've practiced this. And we're prepared for it. It's not going to be a problem. It's not going to throw me and it's not going to throw my dog. So again, it's any of those sorts of things that can prepare you for when things go wrong. Because I totally agree with you, Kamal. I think when people go in the ring, when we go in and it all goes perfectly, and we have all had those. Yeah. And then we've also had those rounds where everything has gone tits up. Everything's gone. And those are the ones is when people say, I didn't know what to do when it went wrong. And it is so important. It's not negative. It's not a negative way of looking at it. We have to be prepared for anything. And you get better and better and better at that, I think, as you become more experienced and the more that you do as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a follow-up point to that, which is one is definitely embrace those challenges, certainly in training, create them, find them, orchestrate them so that you become familiar with dealing with things when it doesn't go correctly. So if you are an obedience competitor, create situations where you have mock stewards and you have an awkward steward, or you have a really a steward that takes you into the ring ropes. If you're an agility competitor, run a course, and even if it doesn't quite go, run it and keep running it so that you are familiar with picking up. And even if you cued the dog to say turn tightly to the left and actually the dog misread it and it did something whilst it might be on the same line or the same course path, the dog has taken the wrong cue, just handle through it so that you develop that skill. If you're doing an IGP, think about when what would you do if this scenario, when the dog, for example, if you're doing a run through and the dog doesn't come back over the jump after one of the retrieves, continue on, because that sort of thing, whilst you might have some points lost, it doesn't mean that you're going to be out of contention or not qualifying or etc. So you want to try and even in training and in environments that you can, to a degree, influence, practice just almost completing it, doing it, with even if you have little wobbles. And that's something that people, certainly in my early part of my career, I would always stay in my comfort zone. Or I'd do it. If the dog went wrong, I'd correct it and I go and I then reward the dog and off I go. I would never allow a little error to happen and continue on the chain or the process. So it gave me the muscle memory of recovering from a little blip. And there's a difference between something that is, going to be, say, for example, you say to your dog, sit and it downs. That's a really black and white area where you might go, okay, I might restart. Not always, but you might go, okay, I'm going to restart. But if your dog, sits and it doesn't quite sit quickly, but you think, okay, it wasn't brilliant, I'm going to keep going, because that's a really important skill for you to develop as a competitor. The ability to go and be present, be connected, keep going, even though sometimes it's a bit of an ugly win, you want to keep going and master that. Any thoughts on it, Jenny?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we become so obsessed about something that went wrong at one part of the round, it then snowballs, because then we're so busy looking back at what just happened that it then snowballs into, we're not thinking about what we're doing at that moment in time, and then something else will go wrong, and something else will go wrong, something else will go wrong, because we're too busy looking back at going, oh God, that was an awful right turn, that right turn was horrendous, or that position was awful. And if you're thinking, you've got to stay in the moment, and if you're thinking about what just went wrong, because actually in training you would want to do something about that, it then affects the whole rest of the round. And I think the other thing, this is really from the dog's mental perspective, is if in training, when we're teaching the dog, no, I don't like that, I'm going to do something about that, whether it is a wide turn or a misposition. If we always interrupt the dog, then some dogs that are particularly sensitive, when it comes to the ring and we want to let go, I'm going to give them a mouth on a retrieve as an example. If we usually go, oh, no, whoops, you've mouthed that, let's do it again. Or it's dropped the article would be another a big classic. The dog's dropped the article and we've gone, oh dear, let's restart that because you dropped it. Then what happens is in the ring, so we talk about us not being able to cope with it going wrong. The dog will then go, oh dear, I've dropped the article. That means she's going to come and get it and restart it. Then you've got a dog that drops the article and then looks at you in the ring. Well, if you never, ever go through that process of allowing the dog also to learn that actually it's okay sometimes to continue on through the chain, even with an error. Put the error right, dog, and then continue on the rest of the chain, because we all know you can still win classes with a dropped retrieve, depending on how well everything else has gone. There's no point throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I think this is the problem sometimes, is it affects us when we are worried about those little things that have gone wrong and we keep thinking about them. But it can also worry the dog if we are that particular in our training and then it comes to a competition and the dog goes, oh no, might as well stop. Might as well stop, because I know now I've done that, this is going to happen. And I think that's the other thing to consider about how whether it's competition and training, we need to prepare. It's another preparation for competition, is that sometimes we've got to let those things go, because we sure as hell need to let them go in competition. There is never going to be the perfect round. I mean, I know you occasionally get, IGP, you will get hundreds occasionally, that sort of stuff. But, very, very rarely do we ever have the perfect round. And, certainly I never consider my rounds perfect.
And even if you got 100 IGP, or you got, a clear round in obedience, or, even if you got a clear run in agility, there's going to be things as a trainer that you're going to see and you're going to be aware of. And it's always battling those two personas, the dog trainer in you and the competitor. And often the competitor, depending on your personality, one voice can have more of a say than other. The goal is to obviously have the two things in balance, understanding that there's going to be a shifting criteria when you're going to competition, letting it go to a degree, but not to the point of where you're going to erode your training. Similarly, as a trainer, allowing those little tiny things to slip. Yes, okay, it might niggle you that the left toe wasn't quite perfectly in line with the right, etc. But that's details that aren't going to necessarily stop you being successful and moving up the competitive ladder. So when we talk about being nervous, I should say, let me reframe that. When we talk about nerves, one of the things that people throw about in contrast or in response to that is, how do we create confidence? How do we create confidence within the competitor or the person? So you've got an eclectic mix of people and dog sports in your community, the GSD hub. I have, coached probably every single dog sports that you could possibly think of, to world championship level, crufts, etc. What for you is the biggest and most important way that people can create confidence?
There's several top ones, but I would say for me that my recommendation is always for people to understand that it won't always be perfect, and that's okay. And that's not to say, oh, it doesn't matter if it all goes wrong all the time, as long as you can find, something positive in it. Oh, that's okay. No, I'm not going there. I'm not saying that it's okay that things keep going wrong all the time. What I say to all of mine is, it's fine. Things will go wrong. You learn from it for next time. But accept, I think a lot of people struggle to accept that things have gone wrong or not as we would have liked. And it's if there's one thing people can get their heads around, is that they need to understand it is part of the process. It honestly is part of the process, and it is part of the process for every single competitor. Absolutely. A lot of people, I don't know about your guys, Kamal, but a lot of mine worry about what people think of them. They don't like being watched, and they worry about what people are going to think of them. And I think a lot of that comes from feeling that other people are better than them, and I think what happens is what they don't realize is those people that they think are better than them also go through the moments where it all goes wrong, where it all goes, or goes out the window. All the training goes out the window. Dogs are dogs at the end of the day. We're not just dealing with us. We're dealing with the dog at the end of the lead. And I think it's understanding in first place that it is part of the process. It's part of the process that things won't always go okay, go well. And that's fine. That's fine. It's just about learning about what went wrong and moving on from there. Preparation's key for me, though. I have to say, preparation every step of the way. If the dog understands what's asked of it, and you understand how to ask, how to give the cues and stuff like that, and you're very clear in your setups, I think that makes a massive difference to a handler. So I think there's a little bit of both. I think there's the preparation is key. Better train your dog, the less you've got to be nervous about. But also it's understanding that it's absolutely fine if things don't go perfect, because they won't always go perfect. Same for all of us. You had one the other week, didn't you? Where yours, you've had an uncharacteristic error for one of your dogs on an exercise that actually because I even said to you, didn't I? He'll be fine, Kamal. He's a really good scent dog. You'll be fine. And subtle, not that day. Not when it was really needed. Not that day.
Yeah, and that is, I shared this on. I shared this on social media because obviously, I think there's a couple of things to that point. So I shared it on social media because that's the process of dog sports. It's to share your successes, and it's fantastic, and that's brilliant. But it's okay to say, do you know what? It went a bit left, and that's the part and parcel of it. It is our response to those moments that are critical. So for me, the key things for confidence is exactly that: having what I call bounce back ability, the ability to recover when you have a knock. Because the process of dog sports and embarking on this journey, whether you do obedience, agility, IGP, working trials, heel to music, field trial, rally-o, it does not matter. The process is the same, and it's normally attached to our stuff. It's a process of self-discovery. Our past stuff is going to come bubbling to the fore, our insecurities, our belief systems, and so forth. It's all going to come bubbling up, and it's going to be put on that little four-legged creature's shoulders. And we have to first, look at it as it is. We're not bringing about world peace. We're only dog training. That's the first thing. Look at it for what it is. When you look at some of the incredible things that people do in this world, dog sports isn't necessarily something that's going to, be comparative
to
the
world on fire.
Yeah, exactly. To saving somebody's life. Somebody shared it, funny enough, on social media about an agility competitor in Ukraine, and how, at the moment, obviously with what they've got going over there, how she had to, she was doing an agility. She said, I want some lightness in this time of darkness, and how she was using agility to keep her spirits up. And you think, wow, to have that level of mental strength in something that's so challenging. To me, that was a real poignant thing to read just before we did this conversation. So one is making sure that you see it for what it is. That we all, as long as you're healthy, the dog's healthy, etc. But in the same vein, there is nothing wrong with saying, do you know what, this is really important to me. I really want to do well at this particular endeavor. I've got a goal, and it's normal to get emotionally connected to that goal. To when it doesn't happen, don't get me wrong. I was absolutely gutted.
Yeah.
And I allowed myself to feel that emotion of feeling disappointment, feeling that I had, let the dog down, that I hadn't, covered the bases. I thought in hindsight, I could have done 100 things differently. I'd let my bowel down. I felt a great sense of like, oh, for God's sake, I was so close. And yet I allowed myself to feel all those things. And then I allowed myself a grace of an hour or so. And then went, okay, that's done now. It's in the past.
And that's the important bit, isn't it? That's the important bit, is to be able to, it's not wrong to get it out of your system. It's not wrong to say, oh my God, like you said, to be disappointed. It's not wrong. Yeah. It's normal. It's a human emotion, and it's absolutely normal. But to wallow in that for the next 3 months, well, that's the bit that we really need to change. We need to be able to do it and then move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my response. It's like, okay, how can I do better? How can I, what can I take from that experience? So that's really critical. Another thing that I think is really, really important about confidence, and I say this all the time to my students and the people that I coach, is beware of the words that you use to talk about yourself or your dog. I'm a big one that doesn't believe in labels on people or their dogs, because labels limit us. They put you in a box, and the label might be the breed. Oh, it's a German Shepherd, it can't do this. Or it's a blah, blah, blah. It's a Beagle, it can't do that. Or, it's a rescue dog, or it's got this challenge, but it's a reactive dog. And again, I've got an online course called Relabeling Reactivity to talk to that point of it. Labels put us in boxes. So be mindful of the words that you talk to yourself. Those words can be sometimes, again, deeply rooted. They may have been things that you've been told about yourself in the past. And it's really important that you recognize those moments, and you have a response for when that happens. When your default response is when you fail, for example, or when the dog fails, inverted commas, instantly, I'm so rubbish, you're so useless, and that self-deprecating mindset comes to the fore. You need to have something in your toolbox, again, talking about preparation, have something that you're prepared to retaliate to and combat that happening, either to yourself, or if well-intended people give you feedback, have stock phrases that you can feed back to them in order to empower yourself in those moments. That's really, really, really critical. So definitely be aware of what you say to yourself. Definitely bounce back ability. The other thing that I would say is that this is the biggest thing that for me is often, certainly in the world of social media, is be honest. Be honest with yourself. It's very easy to sort of say, hey, you know what, my dog fell, but you know what, I had a lovely day and I saw my friends and I love my dog and etc. All of that is true, but I was absolutely disappointed. And I'm going to tell you I was disappointed because that's my honest feeling. I don't need to sugarcoat it. I can have a moment by my van and gather my thoughts. I can get on the phone and vent to my friend. I can go, put a voice note going, saying a load of swear words, whatever it is that I need to do, move forward that moment. I'm not going to be disingenuous and say, but you know what, we had this connection and it was wonderful, and all. It's being disingenuous. Be honest with yourself. Be honest and say, do you know what, I was absolutely devastated. I've worked really hard for that moment. And again, it's okay. The other thing is to be honest and say, do you know what, actually, this should be better. I could do this better.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was another conversation I had. So, going, can I make him better? The fact that in that instance, a lot of dogs had issues. I'm going to take that as a note to self. I'm not going to go there and, be a reactive trainer and think that I have a problem. That's something that can be done.
That's a real common. But my dog did this in the ring. And I always say, if your dog's done it as a one-off, I mean, everything needs to evolve. All of your dog's training needs to evolve as you go through the classes. But just because it did something once in the ring, doesn't mean you need to go off and train that one thing. It does the dog normally do it 8 out of 10 times as well as they need to. The going off and reacting to what happened. I think is what often digs bigger holes.
Definitely. It makes a problem that you actually didn't have. So that's a really, really important thing, you know, and that's where the art of competing is. I say this to people I coach, you know, when they say, oh, he did this at the weekend, they're like, well, do you have a problem with that exercise or that?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's make a note of it, but let's not jump on the bandwagon, because you're gonna something that was insignificant. Next thing you know, it's gonna be a big problem, and then what was an issue now?
What wasn't? Yeah, it's going to be dug into a big hole. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you know, when
you're talking about different dogs, don't you, Kamal? Do you have different dogs that you have to? Some of your dogs are more responsive to your handling than others.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, you know, having a lot of different dogs and having done a lot of different sports, you do learn that some dogs respond differently. So I would say I've had dogs that when I get that nerve-sighted mindset, they actually come up and get high from it. Yeah. So then that actually, you know, can be as challenging to deal with as the dog that shuts down and goes into itself. I've had both ends of the spectrum, as I know you have as well. And the key thing is again, it all is about being able to channel and utilize those feelings, those emotions as superpowers. And that's what definitely I encourage my students to do. I coach my students to do. I work on myself, and that's been, again, a journey of self-discovery that started very early in my career. And now, you know, I love competing now, certainly at a higher level of competition. I really get that buzz. I love, you know, the preparation, I build up. I love, it's, you know, I love all that goes in it, the highs, the lows, the dramas of it all. I absolutely love it, you know, and I think that having that, again, that was an acquired skill. You know, I had to, you know, for me, it was about mastering my anxieties. It was about learning to control my mind. And the ironic thing, when I made Tie Up, who was my first champion, it was, I had visualized in my mind that I was going to win the ticket at a certain show. And I had a 6-week plan that I worked backwards down to, there had been a lot of things that had gone before that, but I literally wrote an instruction manual to myself, 6 weeks off, of what I was going to do with his fitness, his exercise, his training, myself, etc. And each week I would follow that process. And
it sounds like me.
Yeah, and the day before, my plan was do a training round with him. No, sorry, it was compete with the dog. It was in open sea, so I said compete with the dog, and I did that because I said give yourself. The reason I said that was put the round together the day before. Give yourself the confidence at that venue. You know he can do it here. He'll do it anyway. So, and when I got there, I was going to actually change my plan. I was thinking, oh no, don't do that. Do a training round. And I'd done training rounds in preparation beforehand, so I knew that this was part of my training plan, or my plan. And I went to my car, looked at my notes. I can remember sitting in my Ford van, looked at my notes, and my notes said to do the test, and that's exactly what I did. And the next day he went and worked. Probably went like it was one of those rounds that everything just goes in your favor. And I remember going into Scent. I had my instructions what to do. I went to ringside because, again, you're going to get people giving you feedback and guidance with best intentions. Do you want help, etc.? I remember putting my, it would have been my iPod probably back then, with my headphones in my ears, blinkering it out, goggles on, knew what I had to do, did it, and it all came together. But that was a accumulation of a lot of self-discovery journey of overcoming, because I had said for the longest time my nerves was his undoing. And knowing how to work through that has been the gift. The irony is it was a gift, because now I help other people do that. I know what they're feeling. I know how important it is to them. I know that when they, you know, that self-doubt, that, you know, self-deprecating mindset, that anxiety, that all the stuff, I've been there, done it, and got the t-shirt, and being able to come through it. How about yourself, Jenny? At the moment, when you go into competition, what is going through your mind then as you compete?
I'm always a big believer in getting myself together before I go in. So I won't get involved in chatting to other people. As naturally social as I am, if I'm in competing mode, I'm very much, I like to go into my own little world with me and the dog. Even if I used to do a lot of it before I left my vehicle. So a lot of sitting in my vehicle and working through, just thinking through what my cues were going to be. I'd have myself a little checklist before I go in, as to thinking about how I'm going to get from A to B. You know, the things that we all think in training comes naturally, and it does come naturally. But as soon as nerves start to play a part, everything starts to go a little bit wrong if you've not got them clear in your head. So I know with a couple of mine, I've said to them that they do their setups in the ring, no problem, in training when there's no pressure. And then as soon as they start to feel nervous, and it all goes wrong. So I'm always, if I know that there's an area that might go a little bit fluffy or grey, then I will remind myself of that. And I do it often before I leave the van, because it can be hard. You can get so distracted en route to rings. Yeah. So it doesn't start for me when I get to the ring. It starts for me way before I actually get to the ring. And that's a really, really important part for me, for getting my head in gear for what I'm about to do when I go in the ring. Because the one thing that I think is important in that ring is, if you do nothing else, is pause and think. And it is the hardest thing to do when you're nervous, is to pause and take things one step at a time. It becomes a runaway train when you're nervous. And the biggest learning curve for me was trying to slow that runaway train down, and to have a little plan before I get there as to how I'm going to deal with, how I'm going to put the brakes on that vehicle when I'm coming to a corner. And that's what happens with me when I'm nervous, is if I've had to learn to, which is very natural for me, slow everything down. Take it a step at a time. And I'm terrible, probably in lots of ways now, for people to steward, because I will never be rushed with my dog from A to B. I'll never be rushed. Doesn't matter what the steward's like, I will take my time. And it feels sometimes like I'm very much in slow motion for what is my natural character. And I'm sure, I look back at videos, videoing is great, by the way. I look back at videos and I go, do you know, it didn't look slow. It didn't look delayed. It didn't look, like I was being particularly rude, but you could feel that way if you let yourself. But to me, it's about me, my dog, and me thinking about everything before I do it, as opposed to just reacting. It's about being in the moment. A bit like we said earlier about something goes wrong and all you do in your head is think back to what's just gone wrong, not think about what you're about to do. So I always, I don't, it sounds awful, but I don't really want anything to do with anybody before I compete. And as I said, I'm very social, but if I'm competing and somebody came to talk to me in that time, I would say, I'm sorry, I'm just about to go and go in the ring. I'm about to go and compete. And I have to say, I don't know about what you find, Kamal, but I find the majority of people are really understanding of that, because they are in this with us. And I think as soon as you say, oh, I'm sorry, but I've got to go and I'm just got to go and compete the dog, or I'm just about to go in there, most people, oh, I'm sorry, and they'll move away and leave you alone. So
I think that's the power of how words, isn't it? Knowing how to, you don't have to be rude or combative. You can just say, oh, I'll come. I mean, I had it literally the other week, and I said, oh, somebody wanted to speak to me about a judging appointment, and I said, oh, I'm just about to go and look at the dog. I'll catch you afterwards. And they were absolutely fine.
And I think that's the thing for people to remember, is everybody in the sport that you're in, the judges and the stewards, they know what it's like. They've been there. They are there on a regular basis. So they don't, it sounds awful, don't put them on a pedestal on that day, because they're just normal competitors, just like we are. And I think this is slightly different off track, but something that really helps a lot of people that I speak to is I encourage them to go and steward or scoreboard. Go and do something. Go and help at a show or a trial, because you get to see up close and personal that everybody struggles with nerves. Or, you know, even if you don't say there they are somebody who seems to cover it really well, their dogs go wrong. Their dogs mess up. It doesn't always go right for everybody. And it is so good for I think, competitors, especially those at the lower levels, especially, to see that it's the same for everybody. It absolutely is. But for me, biggest thing for me is I take time on my own to get my head in gear before I even get my dog out that van. Because once that dog's out the van, I'm then having to concentrate on my dog and not just on me. So I always take time for just me before the dog even comes out of the vehicle. So that's a big.
I think that's a really good one, and I think there's a couple of really good points there. So anybody that is struggling with confidence or nerves or apprehension, there is some simple and effective things that you can do practically to help overcome that. One is obviously preparation. Be prepared. Practically be prepared. Get your clothing out the night before, pack your vehicle, etc. Whatever it is, make sure you've got your training gear in there, whatever you need for that particular event. Make sure that you've got it there in a location where it's accessible. That's a practical, simple thing that you can do. Secondly is give yourself that the tools verbally to communicate when you are in that competitive mode. Have some stock phrases that you can go to. I'll get back to you. I'm just going to go and compete. Thank you. Just give me 5 minutes. I'm just going to do my round. Whatever the case may be, things that you can go to deflect people with good intentions that might interrupt that connection and togetherness that you are feeling. Another simple, practical thing that you can do is isolate yourself, for a period of time just before. Have that quiet time where you can gather your thoughts, remember your cues, check your equipment, your footwear, etc., so that you know that you're in the best possible shape to perform in that competition, and things that you could just do a quick little check within yourself. Make sure that you remember all your cues, etc. That little quiet time beforehand, really, really important. If you are a person that struggles remembering, get a little notebook or on your phone or even a post-it note. Put it in somewhere prominent in your vehicle, however you're getting to the competition, and do a little checklist that you can go through. And that might be, depending if you're working multiple dogs in different sports, it might be specific. So if need be, have a color for a specific dog, or have in a different, on your phone, app. You can get loads of fantastic apps that you can use to store information specifically so that you can pull it up, etc. Another thing that you can do when you do feel yourself getting nervous and apprehensive is to be aware of the physical changes. And one of the things that we start to do is get a little bit shorter in our breath. So box breathing, 4 in, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and repeat that process so that it just regulates your body, gets you to your mind to stop going to orbit and brings it back to ground zero, and just starts to have you be more functioning and present for what's about to take place. Connecting with yourself. Okay, I've got my right shoes on, I've got my jacket on, my treats are out my pockets, etc., whatever the case may be. Those simple little things that you can do that just help your mind get back to the ground zero, and therefore you can perform at your best. So simple, practical things that you can do. So there are some questions coming up, and there was questions that people had beforehand, and I'm just going to have a look at those before we draw things to a close. So Susan Ward asked, I have a question which cropped up on the weekend, the course I did with you, how to move from old beliefs. This is a really good question. How do you move from old beliefs linked to past dogs and experiences and open up the possibility of what could be when you have a dog with the potential to do well? Any thoughts on that one? That's a really good question. How do you move from old beliefs linked to past dogs and experiences and open up the possibilities of what you could do? What could be when you have a dog with the potential to do well? So I will share a conversation I had with a competitor recently. Not actually somebody that I coach, but somebody that's on the circuit. And she's been competing for a very long time. And we were talking about the current dog that she's having that had some near misses. And she was basically saying that, she didn't think that she was, she'd ever win a ticket, and etc. She does obedience. And she was just sharing her frustrations and, it's never going to happen, and so forth and so forth. And I asked her the question, and I shared it on social media as well. If not you, then whom? Well, if not you, then whom? Who else is it that could be successful if not for yourself? And that's the first thing that I would say to in responses to Susan's question. If you have a past history that you may have attached to your dog training journey and your belief of yourself, the first thing is to ask yourself, well, if not me, then whom? Who should have this moment? Who should have this success? Who should achieve that goal? Who should get that qualification, whatever the case may be? That's the first thing. Second thing is to be aware that dogs don't look at the past. They are very much about the present. So your dog doesn't know about the dogs of old. They know about your experience, your connection with them, the training that you've put in, etc., etc. And the third thing I would say to that point about, a dog with potential, put that aside and just focus on the process. Is often you can hear that, you see dogs that have incredible amounts of potential, and you can hear the rumblings of expectation and pressure.
Yeah.
And the key thing is to just, Jenny will attest to this, run your own race. Do the work, put the mileage in, cover all the bases, do the preparation, and let the chips fall where they fall. Because when you look back, you want to say to yourself, I gave it my best attempt. And that is all that we can ever do. Any thoughts on that one?
The thing I'd add to that, and this is from a very emotional perspective, is don't waste time with your current dog by going backwards to your other dogs. Because you've got a new being there that has a new journey attached to it, and you want to involve yourself in that and everything that comes with that, without the constant comparisons. What's that other one? Comparison is the thief of joy, and it absolutely is when it comes to dog training. Because I can honestly say every single dog I've had has been, you learn from every single dog. It's been a different journey with every single dog, and all mine are related, but they're still different, and I still have a different journey with each dog, because I'm at a different point each time I have that dog as well. So I've changed each time I've had a new dog. So I've evolved, and then I have a new dog, and I would honestly say, if from your practical tips, but I would always say, and I come often from an emotional relationship perspective, it's really important to me, because I believe that's what dog sports are about. The biggest buzz for me is the relationship stuff, and I want to make sure that I make the most of that, and I don't want to waste time by thinking back to my other one. So embrace who you've got in front of you. It's why I sit back and don't do a lot with my pups when they're tiny. I'm like, let's go back to this run your own race. I want to see who my puppy is. I want to see who this character in front of me is. I don't want to go in and start masking everything by starting to do training. I want to enjoy them for who they are and who they are at that moment in time. Because it doesn't last long enough. It does not last long enough having these dogs. So if there's, if that helps at all, yeah,
definitely. And further to that, I mean, I definitely had the experience years ago where I had fallen foul to that, where I'd had 2 dogs that I'd lost, unfortunately, young, and I very much impulsively went out and got 2 other dogs, and I was definitely in the mindset of comparing, 2 dogs. So, well, so and so wouldn't have that, and so wouldn't do that, and this dog isn't like that one. And I was definitely, and the irony was I wasn't seeing the brilliance that was in front of me.
Absolutely,
a very close friend to say, essentially in a quite a harsh way, like in a quite an honest way, they're gone. We can't undo what they are, but you're not going to see the brilliance of these dogs until you should move forward. There's a great book called Where Did You I've got to think of it now, the title. Where Did You Put My Cheese, I think is the books. But it really talks about dealing with that side of things. We're being connected, not looking backwards, moving forwards, and being, and forget the whole potential bit. Just enjoy the process. Yeah. That's a really good point. Okay, next question. So this is from Suz Sewell. So what happens if you feel you have a pretty balanced mindset, but you realize you mustn't because you get impacted by people in a group class situation who identify as nervous, lacking in self-belief, and lacking in confidence? How do you remain optimistic and supportive without enabling individuals who have strong attachment to these parts of their personality? How do you encourage them to work on their mindset while protecting your own? That's a great question. That's one that we deal with essentially in our job, isn't it? Really, how do?
Kamal, sorry. Can you rephrase that? I don't understand it. You're reading it. It's easier for you to read it.
That's okay. So what happens if you feel a pretty balanced mindset, but you realize you mustn't because you get impacted by people who identify as nervous, lacking in confidence and self-belief?
Okay, so being around other people that are nervous all the time. Got you.
How do you remain optimistic and supportive without enabling individuals who have strong attachment to these parts of their personality? How do you encourage them to work on their own mindset while protecting your own?
Okay, really good question. Really, really good question. I would say to start off with is you have to get a little bit selfish.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly would say sometimes you've got to be a bit selfish, and that might be. That doesn't mean you don't spend time with those people. I don't mean that. But if you're competing, if you're particularly competing that day, you need to try to find space for yourself, because the one thing, I've had this with one of my guys actually. She's the sweetest person going. She actually does struggle with her own nerves, and yet she really likes to help other people.
Yeah.
And we had to have a really quite a strong conversation where I actually did say to her, because she'd then come away and then feel she'd let her dog down. So she was trying to help this person, but she let her own dog down, and so on. And I said to her, you have to become a little bit selfish when you're at a show, and you have to put your dog first. And for me, if you feel that you're going to be affected by somebody else, then just ensure that you keep some time for yourself at the show. So you keep yourself to yourself for some part of the show, because I think if you're constantly surrounded by people who need a lot of support, let's say support, then you'll end up with very little left for yourself. And it doesn't mean you can't keep that in its own box. You can't. There's nothing to stop you from being with those people and helping them when you haven't got your dog with you, and then finding time where you go off and you do it on your own, or you have somebody with you who's slightly more positive. And it is a blooming good question, because I think this is something that so many people get involved in through wanting to be helpful with their friends or the people that they know or the people that they want to support. And I encourage my groups to all support each other.
Yep.
But sometimes you've just got to take a step away to do right by your own dog. And I think that's the thing to try and remember is the good thing is this lady's already aware that actually it can affect. So she's already aware, and that's a really, really good starting point. Because if you're not aware it's affecting you, that's a different conversation, really. But if she's already aware that it could affect her, then I think some people will drain you. There are people that will definitely drain you, and I think you can still help those people, but you also need to make sure that you then give yourself some time away so that you can concentrate on you and your dog, so you can then shut that off and then move into your own space, shut that off, move back to helping. So keep it in boxes.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice. The other thing I'd say to that is, as a coach, as a sort of community leader, I create a culture of support where I want people to feel that they can share their ups and their downs. So having a community around them to uplift them and to support them is a massive, massive part, certainly of my philosophy to teaching and coaching. In the same vein, it's really important that the individual takes responsibility for their mindset, their mental health, etc. And that means by protecting it, so be mindful of the energy that you let into your bubble, so to speak. Certainly, as I've got friends that I'm really, really close to that have a glass half full mentality, and that's absolutely fine. But I just don't get in. I don't. When I'm in competing mode, I probably wouldn't hang around with them in that context.
Absolutely.
But I'll put the world to right. We'll have a cup of tea. We'll hang out and we'll, talk about whatever, etc. And I can, spend time with them. But in a competing entity, I just create that little bit of line. There's nothing. The thing is, the misconception is that you can't do both things. Of course you can.
Yeah.
And be there for them when they need me, to be a safe space. I can also say, okay, I'm going to go off and do my thing, and I'll be back, and I'll kick on in with you, etc., etc. There, you can absolutely be
definitely.
both. The caveat to that is, you can only do that if your cup is full. You can't give, when you're giving to everybody else, you've got to make sure that you're looking at yourself, and that means self-care. That means investing in your own self-worth, etc. Doing things that fill your cup up, etc. So making sure surrounding yourself with like-minded people that can boost you, being part of a community which uplifts you so that you can then give that to others, I should say. And the other thing is, I always think lead by example, show people what is possible, by you being upbeat, by you being positive, showing people what is possible, you'll find that will start to have a ripple effect. That's definitely something that I try and do on a regular basis. Okie dokie. So let's have a look at these more questions. So Claire said, my behavior changes and my dog picks up on it. Been listening to meditation with sports competitors. Sorry, always something to work on. Yeah, great. I mean, meditation is fantastic for lots of things. Visualization, meditation, anything that causes you to be aware of self is so important and critical, not only for just who you are as a person, but to certainly for dog sports. I do that sort of stuff in different ways. We all have our practice. My practice is exercise. That's the place where I'm at my most zen, for want of a better term. If you tried to make me be still, it would be very frustrating because of my personality. But if you put me on a treadmill or I exercise, I can clear my thoughts, and that's how I process. So find the way that works for you. That's really, really critical. I think there's a misconception that you have to, one size fits all. You have to do meditation, you have to do visualization. Find your way of, okay, I've got all these thoughts juggling in my mind. How do I make them? How do I process them? Find what works for you. Any thoughts on that one, Jenny? What do you do to
Mine is driving and listening to music. Right. My best thoughts, my best dreams, my best goals, my best processes that I'm working on all happen when I'm driving long journeys, listening to music. So I'm on my own, and I cannot, probably a bit like you with your exercise, I cannot do anything else. I'm on the motorway, I've got the music on, and that's when that's when I become more motivated. It sounds daft, doesn't it? Sitting in a van, driving up the motorway makes me more motivated to actually want to do, to get out there and do what I need to do with the dogs. But having that time on my own, when I can't get distracted by anything else, works brilliantly for me. I'm big into music in terms of I'm very highly affected by music, so you'll know what I'm feeling according to the music that I'm playing. So I'm very much that way. So my dogs have a playlist for each dog. So that I'm
definitely. I think that's a really find the thing that works for you. It doesn't have to be a stock thing. Whatever works for you as an individual. Okay, so Emma said, hello both. Lando, my border collie, and I compete in rally and obedience, and I struggle massively with nerves to the point it affects him and makes him reactive towards judges and the stewards and the scribes. So, Emma, definitely, hopefully the conversation has helped you. For me, the big thing is prepare. Preparation is going to give you an abundance of confidence. First off, and ask yourself, what is it that's making you nervous? What are you thinking is going to go wrong? Have you trained against that? Have you prepared for it? If that's the case, also find environments that you can either replicate the picture that you're going to see in competition, and find a community of people that can help you make that reality. That's a really, really big one, especially when you have a dog that has reactivity challenges. Find your people, find your tribe that can help you move forward through those struggles. Any thoughts, Jenny?
Yeah, definitely. My first thing that came to mind for me was preparation. And I've had dogs that are reactive, that have competed and not been comfortable in certain situations, and it's all about prep for that dog, teaching the picture and teaching an exact routine in that picture, so the dog feels actually more secure, and I feel more secure because I know exactly what I'm going to do and what I'm going to ask the dog to do. And I think if you've got a dog that's responding to you and he's becoming reactive because of you, the more you have a routine and you have a set thing that you ask the dog to do in those situations, the more confidence he will have in you taking control of the situation. And I think, that at the end of the day, it's a real partnership. Whatever sport we do, it's a real partnership. And you can absolutely understand, certainly my breed, they are likely, if they are lacking confidence and they don't see me as saying, it's fine, don't you worry, we're just going to do this, it's not a problem. And that's hard to do when you're nervous. It's really, really hard if you're nervous to say to the dog, look, don't worry, mate, we're just going to do this, that's not a problem, that person walking towards us isn't a problem. And the more that you prepare a picture for the dog, and it becomes a thoroughly reliable behavior that is then tested with people that you trust. And I think that's an important thing. Test it with people that you trust to begin with, that will do exactly what you ask them to do. So you could even set it up with things like, I don't want you to come any closer than that line there while I go through my routine. And then as time goes on, obviously you'll be able to have that little line closer, or the where you want them to be closer, and you can become confident in your dog's confidence in you, actually. And I think the more that you can prep those types of things, those types of situations, the more confident you will feel in each other, because that's what it comes down to. It comes down to that partnership side of things. So that would definitely be mine.
Yeah, definitely. So Julie said, nervous competing with her reactive fatigue whilst trying to compete agility. Remember the course, but having to be 500% compete on the behaviour, concentrate on the behaviour, and we're going to jumpstart tomorrow. So the thing I'd say, obviously knowing Julie's dog really well, and Julie is, that it is a process. Okay, when you've had a dog with a behaviour challenge, that has to be your biggest priority, because that's about life. You know, the rosettes is secondary to your dog being safe, you feeling confident in your dog's behavior. Once you've mastered that, then you can add the other skills to it. Now, obviously, with agility specifically, you can practice running courses without a dog, so you can give yourself that skill set. But again, when you first embark on that process of taking a dog with a behavior challenge into those environments, set yourself up for success. Do the minimal that you need to, reward the dog, build up that history of reinforcement for good responses, for not only for behavior, but for you experiencing this dog behaving appropriately, and just give it sufficient time. The biggest thing that people struggle with, certainly, which can create apprehension, is trying to forsaking what they want for what they want right now, i.e. putting their dog in early, over competing it, over facing it, then something goes wrong, and then that shatters their confidence, and then they got on this downward spiral of dejection. For me, I would always over prepare my dogs, and I'd rather hold them back before I felt they were ready. So that gives me confidence, knowing, you know what, I've done everything.
Totally agree.
And now it's down to
totally agree.
Yeah. So let's have a look at it. So Monique said, how do you handle the nerves for the big shows? I've got problems with my mood ring dog at a normal show, and I have a national coming up. So big events, Jenny, how do you handle the nerves of big events?
I do a lot of prep. Again, this is a surprise. Out in different environments. So I'll go to quite a lot of alien environments that are different for both of us. And then I feel that if whenever I go to the big events, whenever I've gone, I don't know, Crufts Championships, I always say, I want to know that I have prepared my dog for this in every way, shape, or form that I possibly could. And then I go, whatever happens on the day is going to happen on the day. You can't change it once you get to that point. You can only change in the run up to it. On the day, it's too late to do anything. It's too late. I'm not saying you can't prepare in terms of having to think about being with, on your own, getting your dog focused on you, all those things, of course. But the thing that I think really helps is, for me, the pressure is on the build up. The pressure is not really on the day. The day is about having my routine and saying, it's okay, I've done all the hard work. I've done everything that I needed to do for this. It's now just about going through my routine, and what will be. Because I think by the time you get there on the day, the last thing you need is then pressure on the day. What you actually need is to go, well, I've done it all. I put in everything that I can. I could not have done any more to prepare us for this. And so I do lots of going out to different venues and that sort of stuff for me with my dogs. And because I think sometimes with the big events, we can make it into such a big deal that we create pressure. It creates pressure. And I think that is part of the problem with the big events. So, I love the big events, and I love preparing for the big events. But I think the pressure of the big events is in advance. That's where your work needs to go. Once you get to the day itself, you've already done you've already done what you need to do by then, and then it's in the lap of the gods.
Yeah, and just on that note, so Jenny's last dog that she competed in Crufts with, he was a dog that actually was very environmental, and he was very aware of things within the environment, people, etc. And Jenny did a lot of preparation, taking him to shopping centres, taking him to boot fairs, etc. Amusement parks, to prepare him for Crufts. And that started, again, months, if not years before he was in that situation, to create sufficient bubble wrap around the dog's temperament to get him through that. And ironically, he was phenomenal at Crufts. But and he took it all in his stride. But that it also took a bit of management at the event as well, understanding that
definitely.
it was going to be a dog that wanted to sit on the benches all day. So really looking into that and preparing a dog. The biggest thing that I say to people when they're preparing for big events, and I've had students go to, as I said, numerous major world championships in multiple sports and national championships, is to first do your due diligence on what that event looks like. I literally, with one of my students, I remember years ago, who had a giant schnauzer that she took to the world championships. I said, right, get up the venue that you're going to. Let's have a look at what venue it is. Let's go and use the internet to, which is the beauty of these things, to look at the venue and look at what it looks like, so you can start to visualize yourself there. Where you're gonna, what's local to exercise the dog, what's local, where you're gonna stay, planning your route. All that stuff helped alleviate the tension on the day, so that then she knew there was no eventuality that she hadn't covered. So that meant she could focus on the job at hand, and the dog hopefully will take it on his stride. Again, preparation is key. The more preparation that you do, the more confidence that you're going to have. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. So Julie said, this is a long one. So I struggle with balancing Dusty's reactivity with the actual competing and agility, even though we're at the lowest level. It's trying to concentrate on our pre-start routine and keeping her calm, and then staying calm myself on the start line, and then not relaxing criteria, i.e., as I'm worried she won't wait, letting her start too soon. And knowing it's a miracle we're even there, given all that we've been through, doesn't stop the enemy wanting to do well, i.e., not getting eliminated. I think that the thing to say to that point is that is something that we all will face in our own versions, i.e., balancing what we want for what we want right now. Obviously, there's no shame in saying, you know what, I want to win, I want to do well. Why would you not? We all do that, but it's also knowing where you are in your journey, where you are in your process. Jenny's got young dogs competing at the moment. And, one of them just went in and she did incredibly well. She won her first couple of competitions. Jenny knows that the dog's now not ready to move on to the next leg, so she pulls back. And it's, again, running your own race and looking at, she made little baby errors. She made, she was very juvenile. None of it obviously was a major thing, but things that you think, okay, this is going in the right direction. We're not finished yet. There's a lot of work to be done. And it's looking at the dog in the moment of knowing, that you've got to think of the bigger picture constantly. So that would be definitely my take on it. So Nikki asked, is this going to be recorded? Where can we find it? Yes, it will be recorded. It will be on my Facebook page, Jenny's Facebook page, and probably YouTube as well. So it will be available, and obviously feel free to share this. If this can help somebody that a friend, again, if you're in a community, feel free to share this as wherever you want, to give people ideas, tools, and help them overcome their nerves and apprehension. So a couple more questions, and then we're going to go over. I show and start an obedience rally too. Is there a way to calm an overexcited dog that led to excited base reactivity as nervous? It will continue, especially in breed showing, but dog seems fine in obedient shows. So for me, the big thing is being really honest with yourself and asking yourself, what is the triggers in that environment that isn't happening in another? So is there a lack of understanding? Is the picture the problem? Is it in breed showing, I think you mentioned in breed showing, is it the dog, people coming into the dog's personal space? There's loads of things for me that I'd want to unpack to be able to form a plan and hopefully a solution. So first thing is ask yourself the questions. What do you think is causing the challenges? In terms of the dog being over-aroused, that's a bit of a rabbit hole to go, because there could be so many reasons. But the first thing is to identify the core driving force. And most people, on some subconscious level, they probably have a feeling of what it is, and trust your instinct would be my other thing. Any thoughts on that, Jenny?
I mean, over arousal, I know I deal with quite a lot of that with one of my young dogs at the moment, and there's so many reasons why she can be over aroused, and what I would do in one circumstance would be different to what I would do in another, according to what's creating it. So I would do some situations I would scatter feed, but if it's because there's something that's as Kamal said, getting too close to your dog in the way that the people are approaching in breed show, and they often come from the front, don't they? Whereas in obedience shows, you won't often find, apart from them being stood at the beginning when you walk into the ring, you don't often find them stood directly in front of your dog. Whereas the approach is very different. So it really depends on what absolutely minute difference there is in everything. So look at the subtle differences and work out from there. So yeah, I agree with Kamal really on that one. And you need to look a little bit closer into what's going on, as opposed to it necessarily just being a case of he's fine in that one but not in that situation. How do I deal with it? Look at why he's different.
Yeah, perfect.
There's lots of situations dogs don't cope with in one way, but they'll cope in a similar situation. But there are differences. It can be so subtle.
Yeah. And Vanda's point was, that's the best advice, Kamal, Jenny, Kamal. Let it go on the day. That's a light bulb. Absolutely. Don't hold these things. Move forward. You know, allow yourself the grace of going, do you know what? I'm really disappointed. I'm frustrated.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to do it.
Yeah. Okay, that's us done. So hopefully this conversation's been helpful. As I said, if you've enjoyed it, share your comments, or if you have any follow-up questions, by all means ask and we will pick them up. Feel free to let people know about this conversation if you think it will benefit them. We've got plenty more coming over the next couple of weeks, so watch this space. Thank you for your questions. They've been fantastic. It always makes this really, really interesting to do. From myself, from Jenny, thank you very much for joining us. I wish you all the best. And as I said, lots more to come. So we're looking forward to sharing that with you. See you all later.
See you soon. Bye.